Hello, my name is Kenya, and today we're going to be talking about how to create a pivot table. The data set that we have here is a data set that contains 15 rows and over 15 columns and over 1,000 rows. So what we're going to do is to take this data and create small charts with this data, and charts that we can easily manipulate and change and modify. So that's what we're going to be doing. So let's take a little look at the data set that we have here. So as you can see, we have student last name, first name. I have some middle initials in here as well. The STI number, which is the student test identification number. And again, you can see these are randomly selected 101 to 102. Test source code, which is just whether or not the test is online or paper or pencil. The test name, the test scaled score, and the pass rate. For the pass rate, I put a 1 for pass, which is a 400 or higher, and a 0 for failing the test, which is anywhere from anything below a 400. We have student growth percentiles listed here. We have what that student growth percentile is equivalent to, a high, moderate, or low growth. And then I also have numbers indicating whether or not it's high, moderate, or low, so that I can have a count in my charts of high, moderate, or low. And then also the teacher names, which are listed here as group names, but they're teacher names. And so now let's take a look at how to create the pivot table. And you can use a pivot table for small data sets or extremely large data sets that are 1,000 columns in length. This pivot tables make it very easy for you to analyze large data sets and put them in more of a usable format. So let's take a look. So the first thing that you want to do is to make sure that you only have one box highlighted. I always go to A1, which is in the top corner, and make sure that I have my only box highlighted is that one box. The reason is because if you highlight more than one box, then when you start to create your pivot table, it's only going to identify that area for your pivot table data set. Go over to the tab that says Insert, and the first button you can click is the pivot table. So just click that, and it tells you exactly the data set that it's going to be selecting. I have the tab is listed as math, and it gives me that length here. And then you want to make sure that it is going to create the pivot table in a new worksheet. New worksheet is the best thing to do, especially when you are a new user of pivot tables. You do not want to try to do it within the worksheet unless you are a little bit more experienced with creating pivot tables. So click OK. Now, as you can see, they've created a worksheet that is before the data set. So this is your data set, and it automatically creates a new worksheet in the spreadsheet before it. It's good to know because if you're working with a number of different data sets in one workbook, Excel workbook, you want to make sure that you know which pivot table is associated with which data set. So now we have, this is the work area for your pivot table. It's here. Over here are basically these are just your headings from your data set. So you can see here we have student last name, first name, middle initial, STI, and it corresponds to your headers for your data set. You will not be able to use a pivot table unless you have headers for your data set, all bits of data that you have for your data set. It will not work for you if you don't have that. So first you have to think about what kind of data do you want to generate, or what kind of table do you want to generate with your pivot table. So understanding what data I have within my large data set, I'm going to create a pivot table that's going to sort by the exam, either Algebra 1, Geometry, 6th grade math, 7th grade math, 8th grade math, and I want a table that's going to give me the pass rate by teacher. So if you can take a look here, we have the different fields that we can populate. We have the report filter. So what that means is if I want to create different charts based on the test taken, then that's where my filter is going to be. So I need to come over here and get my test name, drag it over to report filter. And you can see here it will, when I click on the arrow down, it has all of my tests here. So that's how it's going to filter my data. And I said before I wanted my data to be sorted by, to be listed by teacher. So I want to have my teachers on the row. So listed down in my rows will be my teachers, teacher 1 through teacher 8. And I want the pass rate. So I'm going to come over here and click and drag to the value. So the value on the row for the teacher is going to be the pass rate. Now if you notice, these do not look like pass rates. That's because it's the sum of the pass rates. So what I need to do is to click the little arrow beside sum of pass rate and click value field settings. When I click that, it brings up the text box here that says that I need to say how do I want this value to be summarized. And I want the value to be summarized as an average. Now when I do an average, I want to make sure that it's an actual percentage. So I'll go over to percentage, and I don't want 2 decimal places, I want no decimal places. So click OK. And so now I know that the overall pass rate for teacher 1 through teacher 8 is, we have a 79, 89, and so forth, and the grand average here is 80% pass rate. Now this is for all the tests. So I can go here and simply say I want to chart this just for Algebra 1. And so here's my pass rate for Algebra 1. I can go here and say I just want 6th grade math. And so now I just have my 6th grade math teacher. It identifies who the teachers are who are teaching 6th grade math and the pass rate for 6th grade math for these teachers. So let me go back and click all. And if your fields go away over here for creating your pivot table, that's fine. Simply click inside of your pivot table area and the field list will come back. Okay, so let's say I wanted to know a little bit about my high growth students. Like, how did my teachers do in terms of high growth? Did they grow the students well, or did they not grow the students? So let's see high growth. So now I have the count for high growth by teacher and the pass rates. So let's say I want, that gives me my number of high, but what am I going to compare this number to? It's my count. I don't know how many students are in each individual classroom. So what I have to do is find a unique identifier to the students that's a number that can give me a count. Well, that would be the student test identification number, and that's the STI number. So I'm going to drag that down here, and this gives me the sum, but it gives me the sum of those individual numbers, and that's not what I want. I want the count. So I click the arrow that's down, click the value, and then click count, because it's going to count each one of those STI numbers and tell me, how many kids are in there. And so we have this number here. Now notice my high and my count are equal. Does that make sense? It does not, because I don't want the count for the high. I want the sum. So this tells me how many high students I have, high growth students I have in the class for teacher 1 compared to the total number of students teacher 1 has. So if you don't fully understand the data that you have here, then it's difficult to figure out exactly how you want to maneuver, the pivot table. So before you start creating a pivot table, always take a look at your numbers and your data spreadsheets before creating your pivot table. Now, some will ask if you can change these headers here, and you can. So I'm going to change this header here because this is really not my count of STI numbers. This is the total number of kids in the class. So I'm just going to type in number of students. And for this one, it's going to be number of high growth. And this is percent of pass rate. Okay. So this gives you a clear understanding as to how this all works out. In terms of having the pass rates there, at the same time having your high growth and number of students. But let's say we want to change this up. And again, remember, with this particular chart, I have multiple charts in one. I have my all, then I have just looking at it from the Algebra 1 perspective, geometry perspective, 7th grade math perspective. All of these are in this one chart. So you don't have to continuously create the same chart over and over and over again. One chart is actually a multitude of charts at one time. So let's say I wanted to not have this in terms of the teacher. I wanted to keep my filter the same. I simply click and drag up to the filter area, up to the field list here. And I'm going to keep my filter. Change this to all. Now let's say I want to compare the pass rates of online tests versus paper pencil test. So that means that I'm going to be having things in relationship to online versus paper pencil. So that was my source code here. So you can see here I have a row for online and paper and pencil. Now I want to come from that, I want my pass rates for paper pencil versus. Now I like to always keep the number of students in my charts, and the reason why I like to do that is because it keeps things in perspective. It also ensures that you know exactly what you're dealing with and if your data is correct or not, because sometimes when you're working with large data sets, if the data set has not, if your pivot table has not captured all of your data, then making sure you have the count of students is always a good thing, because it keeps things, like I said, in perspective. Now I need my pass rate. Bring that over to here. And I don't want my sum. Again, I want my average, and I want my average to be a percent with no zeros. And you can see how I have the number of the count for SEI, which is really the number of students, number of students, and we have, and I can say pass rate percent. And now I can compare online tests versus paper pencil tests. And again, because I have the number of students here, it keeps things in perspective when I'm looking at 81 versus 38. So this is how you create a pivot table, and making sure that you understand that when you create one pivot table, you're creating a multitude of pivot tables. As you can see here with this one pivot table, I have my Algebra 1. I can see how many kids took the online for 6th grade math versus paper pencil for 6th grade math, and so forth. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Have a great day.